Hello, I hope everyone can hear me all right. My name is Yong Tran. I am the Programs Associate of National ACE, also known as the National Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. Today's workshop is Design Thinking for Entrepreneurs. I'm excited to be here today to be your Google expert as always. These workshops are designed to teach you how to take advantage of all the free resources Google has to offer and to take your business to the next level. I'm so excited that you're here with us today. This workshop in particular is especially helpful for aspiring entrepreneurs and those who are looking to find their next new product. So let's get started. We'll be learning the 5 phases of design thinking process and how this process can help you more efficiently build products and services that address the challenges of your target audience. Then we'll go through each phase of the process and discuss how you can apply these concepts to your own ideas, starting with understanding your audience, identifying their challenges, and then crafting and testing the solutions we have for them. Now, this webinar has quite a few activities, so you might want to get your notes out. You can either go traditional and get a pen and pencil, or you can go on Google Docs and make notes. To use Google Docs, just search for, go on your Google email, click on the apps, and then click on Google Docs. It's such an easier way to find your documents rather than go through your piles of paper notes. And so once you're ready with your notes, let's get started. So what exactly is design thinking? Design thinking is a methodology used by designers to solve complex problems. This approach has been used to brainstorm solutions for societal issues, like getting kids to eat healthy school lunches, as well as to help well-established companies redefine their place in the fast-changing industry. You may use design thinking to come up with your first business idea. If you already have a business, you might use a technique to improve an existing service, product, or even your website. Design thinking isn't just for coming up with the next great product or business. It should be an important part of how you connect with your customers now and in the future. It's important to keep in mind that using design thinking process will provide you a framework or process to It will provide you a framework or process to turn an idea into a product. So let's start. Design thinking includes 5 phases, which we see on the slide here. Number 1 is to empathize. This phase, you observe your ideal audience, engage with them, and immerse yourself in their challenges and needs. Good design is all about understanding the needs of your users. Number 2 is define. The defining phase, you will express the problem of your users in the form of their point of view. 3 is ideate. In the ideation phase, you transition from identifying problems to finding the solution to these problems. 4 is the prototype phase. This phase is all about getting the idea out of your head and into the real world. And then finally, the test phase. This is the last phase, and it's all about testing. You can create the next ideation of prototypes. You can create the next iteration of prototypes, test, learn, and iterate. This continuous refinement is an ongoing process. So we talked about what design thinking is and the phases of it, but how is design thinking used in practice? Here are some examples. There are products that you use every day that were created with design thinking. Designers and innovators thought about you, the consumer, and the needs and challenges you have around your everyday activities to make products and services you use and buy better. And so one example of this is on-demand television. Many of you are currently watching on-demand television right now, or streaming services, or your cable provider. Before today's streaming services, you might remember the problems we used to have. Back then, I'm gonna sound like an old person, but way back when, you had to perfectly time when your favorite TV show was coming on and then be home for it because it was only going to show at that time. And then later, they had a system where you can set a timer to record your TV show on your VHS tape. I'm sure you remember those times. And even if you did have a recording, a digital recording of the show, you still had to fast forward through the commercials because you didn't want to watch the commercials. Now they've taken all those annoyances, those problems, and they got rid of it with on-demand television. So you can watch it anytime you want. You don't have to worry about taping over your niece's dance recital VHS tape. And in many cases, you can skip through the commercials altogether with on-demand television. Another example is if you don't have an extra hand, now some cars have the foot activation car door, and so you can open your car door without your hands. And then another example is ride and home sharing. If you wanted a bigger place rather than a hotel room, then you can rent someone's house. If you didn't want to pay for an expensive taxi that usually only is around the airport, you can call Lyft, call an Uber, and then have it show up wherever you need to go, wherever you need to go. All these different solutions to our problems probably came from design thinking. And so think about the other things you use daily, those inventions you couldn't live without. Everyday problems have the potential to be a new product or service. And so this is a great opportunity for you to get those creative juices flowing and have some ideas for your business and your next product. So let's move on to let's go into the first phase of design thinking, empathize. So to establish empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. If we want to focus on the user, our goal as we begin the design thinking process should be first connect with the user's stories, insights, and emotions. We must be able to put ourselves in their shoes. So when I say user, I mean the person or population you're hoping to build a solution for. And so when identifying your user, you want to be as specific as possible by adding more details, not just parents, but parents of toddlers or parents in NYC. It's also important to make sure you understand who your user truly is. If you're looking for a solution for college admissions, you may quickly say that your users are high school graduates. But when you take the time to really think about it, maybe your users aren't the high school graduates, it's actually the parents of high school graduates. And so this practice helps you narrow down the characteristics of your potential audience so you can really dive into the core issues they might face. Think about the way you have described your users or target audience in the past. Oftentimes, we start with the demographic information, such as gender, age, or nationality. Sometimes we only consider one characteristic of an individual, such as parent or working professional. When it comes to users, again, we want to be as specific as possible so we can really understand the audience and what makes them tick. Here are some examples. You might say your audience is women of color, but that's a huge group of people and they have an endless number of unique interests and needs. Let's say you're looking to make a all natural hair care line specifically for women of color. A more targeted explanation of your users would be women of color looking for products without added chemicals or toxins, or women of color who need to use natural products due to health or allergy concerns. You may have a handful of specific audiences, but the details will help you better market to them. Another example is parents. For parents, you may already know, but there's a huge difference between parents of a newborn versus parents of a teenager. So as a designer, what problem you're looking to solve for parents, you may want to think about how old their kids is. And depending on how old their kids are, you may offer nanny services. Or your audience is parents of young children who have not yet in school, or parents who work in demanding jobs. Again, it's all about narrowing down your user base. Two other examples is seniors over 70 in single member homes. Another one is college students seeking temporary housing. As you can see, we started with a pretty broad group and then we narrowed down to specifically what their problems might be, more details about them so we can better target their issues. And so let's get to practice. This is a very short activity you can use, and this is actually going to carry over to the rest of the webinar. First, you're going to step into the shoes of your user base and try to brainstorm at least 5 challenges they might face. Remember, try to specify who these users are, just like we did a minute ago. Really put yourself in their shoes and empathize with their day-to-day. Brainstorm all the potential circumstances they might come across and all the potential obstacles they may come across. I'll give you about 3 minutes to try that out. Again, pull out your Google Docs or pull out a pen and paper. You don't have to share this, but it's definitely something that I would love everyone to do. And so the timer has started. Just take some time to yourself and think about what your audience really need. I think the timer just ended. And so I hope you all got a second to just jot down 5 challenges your audience might need. We'll be moving forward to the next portion of this, and it's the defining stage. This is the second phase of the design thinking process. Define a problem statement. Now that we have a clear image of our users in mind, we want to operationalize the problems. To do so, let's focus on one core problem from our list of 5 challenges that we've created for our user. And so of your list of 5, pick one. Using this core problem, we'll be creating a problem statement. So what is a problem statement and why do we need it? The problem statement is a statement that clearly organizes 1, the characteristic of the user, 2, the user's need or core problem you just identified, and the insight into why the user is experiencing this need. Developing a problem statement is crucial to the design thinking process. Now, this is an example of a completed problem statement. Here we have our user Sam, who is a busy manager. His need or core problem is that he needs to find a way to integrate healthy eating habits. And the reason why he has this need or insight stems from a desire to not feel like he's on a diet. Don't we all? And so this problem statement is telling us that we need to help Sam find some solutions that will help integrate a healthy eating habit for Sam without making him feel like he's on a diet. Pretty clear, right? It can be tempting to try to insert a problem during the problem statement stage of the design thinking process, but hold that thought just for a moment. We'll be thinking about troubleshooting the problems during that ideation phase. Here, we're just pulling from our empathy phase and to hone in the true values of the user and tap in what their true need is. So a good tip I want to share with you is build the problem statement from the bottom up. Start with the insight. Start with what his need is and then go up from there. The more insight you have on the emotions that are driving the need, the better position you are going to the next step. And so now this is your turn. In a few moments, I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on your problem statement. Think back on your notes on your user base. Remember the list of challenges you came up with as you imagine life in their shoes. Now think about all those challenges into a core problem that you will address for your user into a problem statement. I'm going to bring back the previous slide so you don't have to go back, but right here, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Have your target audience, have the user characteristics, what do they need, and the insight. Why does he need it? What are the emotions as to why your user needs X, Y, and Z? For those who just entered, we're just taking a moment to jot down our problem statement. And so it starts with your audience and the characteristic of your audience. Then what is their need and why do they have this need? What are the feelings behind these needs? And so we're in the empathy phase of the customer, so we can find a solution for them. And that was the end of our 3 minutes. Now let's jump into the next phase. Ideating. So now that we're empathized with our chosen user, analyze and synthesize those observations to define the problem using a problem statement, it's time to ideate. Or in other words, create ideas. This phase is where we think about all the possible solutions that come to mind. And this is the more fun part. And so this is a very popular activity used a lot in Google design sprints. It's called Crazy Eights. Using Google Docs or just a sheet of paper, create a table that's 2 by 4. And in these 8 boxes, I need you to create 8 new ideas. Maybe you'll have just one idea, but then 7 different ideas that build upon that one idea, or just 8 separate ideas. The point here is to practice letting loose and creating as many possibilities as you can. Don't worry about feasibility right now. Blue sky thinking is encouraged. So think big, think how to solve the issue we just said in our statement. And before we get into the activity, here are a couple of examples. And so the beauty of this process is that we can let our mind go wild with the ideas. So going back with the previous example with the woman of color and hair products, an idea to solve that challenge is you might want to create your own natural hairline for women of color. Or another idea is you may consider building an app or a database so that women of color can find natural hair products. Another way of solving the problem is maybe you want to open a salon where women of color can go to and expect and be treated with all natural hair care products. You see how different those 3 ideas are, but it solves the same problem. The first one is creating the product itself. The second one is creating an app so they can find a product. The third is creating a salon for them to use that product. Using the college students seeking temporary housing as an example, an idea could be creating an online roommate matching service for college students specifically. Or you can consider investing in a building and you can furnish and offer temporary rentals to your user group. You can also just completely think outside of the box, just scrap the temporary housing completely and create a situation where they don't need to be on campus. Maybe you create an online learning program so they can get college credit from their home. You see how the ideation phase can open your mind to new and different ways of solving the problem for your targeted audience? And so this is the part where you get creative. I'm going to start the timer. And with this timer, you have 3 minutes to just go crazy with your ideas. Think about all the different ways you can solve the problem for your customer. For anybody who just entered, this is just a moment for you to jot down 8 possible solutions to solve the problem that you wrote on your problem statement, or any idea or solutions that come to mind. And any idea and solution can, I'm not speaking correctly today, but any idea or solution that comes to mind is welcome. Just less than a minute left. Usually this phase is a phase where you have unlimited time to think and brainstorm. This activity you can do with anybody, with your team, with just you. Just take a moment to sit down and brainstorm ideas. But because we are limited in time, that's why you only get 12 seconds left. And that was quick, wasn't it? Now it's prototype time. Prototyping. How do we know if these solutions outlined in the last exercise would work? We have to prototype. Prototypes are an inexpensive, scaled down version of the solutions you created in the previous ideation stage. Prototypes one by one, or they are either accepted, improved, and re-examined, or rejected based on the user experience. Remember, this is just an experimental phase. You aren't trying to create a workable product just yet. But this step is crucial as you're testing out your ideas to gain much more feedback from your potential users as possible. Through the prototyping process, you'll gain a better understanding of the constraints within the product or feature and the problems you may not have foreseen. You'll also have a more informed perspective on how real users would react to and feel about the final product while they interact with the prototype. So what's the MVP? The MVP is the minimal viable product, minimal viable product. This is what we call the simplest version of a workable product that is developed with the core features that will satisfy early adopters, but also the lowest risk for investors. This means the MVP should be cost efficient and quick to develop while still providing basic functions that you decided on. And you'll have an idea on what your early adopters, or what you call the first users that are eager to try something new, will be looking for thanks to the prototyping stage. So this image is just an example of what the MVP may look like. The MVP does not look like one piece of your product. The MVP it looks like a skateboard in this particular circumstance. And so if your product is transportation, something to help your customer transport from one place to another, the bare minimum is a skateboard. And as you're adding features to your skateboard, it might become a scooter. And as you're adding more features and adding more budget to that scooter, it becomes a bike. Then more technology, you might add an engine to that bike and it becomes a motorcycle. And then you might add some more fancy specs, some improvements, you redesign it and it turns into a car. This is what we mean by the cheapest and inexpensive product that solves the problem. If the problem is transportation, then the smallest thing that they can test is something that looks like a skateboard. So as you're prototyping, think about how you can create a product that is just bare bones, the bare minimum, but does the job. That's what you want your customers to test. That's what you want your friends to test. And as they're giving you that feedback, you can then build on that and make the improvements and build your very nice car. Now, we won't be prototyping together in this virtual session because this is a virtual session. But following this class, you may want to sit down and think about your options for a prototype. Pick one of your feasible ideas out of the 8 you came up with during the Crazy 8 exercise and flesh it out, how you will build the solution to include the technologies needed, time required, money needed, and resources that you might already have available to you. Last but certainly not least is the testing phase. This is the final stage of the design thinking process. We won't be practicing the stage together, but if you were to implement the design thinking process in real life, you would definitely want to test out your solution, evaluate it, and depending on how it goes, you may or may not have to go back and repeat the other phases. The testing phase is iterative. What does that mean? It means you continue to go back to change, tweak features, and in some cases, you may even decide to scrap the solution for a different one you identified during the prototyping stage. And that concludes the final stage of the design thinking process. To recap, the 5 stages were: 1, empathize, where we step into the shoes of our user base and identify their challenges. 2, define, where we express a core problem in the form of POVs, point of views. Ideate, where we transition from identifying problems to brainstorming as many solutions as possible. 4, prototyping phase, where we brought the ideas out of our heads and into the real world. And finally, the testing stage, which takes us to the next ideation of prototypes to improve the minimal viable product by testing, learning, and iterating again and again. And give yourselves a pat on the back because that was a long process. We had a really hard-working session today. I do see a few questions, and so I'll just answer them really quickly. And so what if I have a couple difficulties finding challenges for my customer? I would say go back to step one, empathy. If you're having issues finding the challenges, you should spend a little more time in their shoes. Or if you just have issues in putting yourself in their shoes, follow a friend who might have those issues, or ask a customer if you can shadow them so you can see what their day-to-day look like, see what challenges might arise for them. And as you're jotting down the different challenges, you can then move on to different phases. I see another question about audiences. And so I have two different audiences. How do I better market for them specifically? How do I build a product for the two audiences? I think that's a bit of a tricky question because you really have to look at your audience to see if there's any common challenges they might have. And depending on their common challenges, you can then build a product based on that. But if your audience is just way too different, you're trying to hit parents with toddlers and you're trying to hit Latino college students, there might not be too many common challenges because the audiences are too different. I recommend just separating completely. You might want different websites, different products, so you can market to your different audiences. And so sister websites would be a great thing for you, or sister businesses that you're running at the same time if you really want to target both audiences. And then the last question is actually a very good question. What if I have trouble coming up with 8 ideas? So the 8 ideas is just recommended, more or less. But what's important is you need enough ideas where you're not committed to one idea. I think a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up when they have just one really, really, really good idea and they get stuck on it. And so when they're going through the different phases of the ideation process, the different phases of the design thinking process, they see some signs that it might not work, or a competitor might be doing it better, or the customer, may not want or use the product as intended. And you're so committed to that idea that you keep pushing it, even though you have the signs that it might not work. It's always good to have back burner ideas so that you don't have to just start over from the beginning. And so at the very least, get a couple really good ideas in. Don't get stuck on just one idea. Okay, dokie. Okay, we can definitely wrap up as usual. Here are some resources. One, if you want to sharpen your business and marketing skills, check out Premiere. This free app you can download on your phone. If you have an Android device, you can download it on Google Play. If you have an Apple device, you can download it from the Apple App Store. This is a series of short and fun lessons that are less than 5 minutes each. And you can always, as always, continue your education with Grow with Google and National ACE. You can sign up for more trainings at the National ACE Small Business Resource Recovery Center at www.acesmallbusiness.org, or you can just type in bit.ly/ace-gwg. You can find the recordings of our previous workshops, and you can also sign up for next week's training, connect with customers, and manage your business remotely. We'll also have our 2 final webinars at the end of this month: collaborate, meet, and work remotely, and also do global with Google's Market Finder. As always, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you being here today with me. We are API Strong. This is National ACE with Grow with Google. Have a great day. Bye.